Welcome to the Mary Grace Show. I'm Mary Grace, the voice of sanity, to help you navigate politics, culture, wellness, faith, and world events. Today, we have with us a returning guest. He is returning for some of you, brand new for some. When we first streamed our show with him, we were restricted to the platforms we were on. And as we get into the topic, you will probably understand why. Jeff Younger is our guest today. He is the father of a young man called James Younger. Some of you may recognize that name, especially if you've been following the gender affirming movement, the transgender movement, because Jeff has been fighting the Texas courts, the California courts, to prevent the chemical transitioning of his son from boy to girl. This has been an ongoing issue, and just recently, on the 28th of January this year, President Trump issued a presidential order stopping that, essentially halting all of that from happening to children under the age of 19. And I wanted to welcome you back to the show. I think things are really heating up in your world, and
Yeah,
it's good to have you back. Welcome back, Jeff Younger.
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I thought what we would do as we get started here is we're going to play a short video that will give a recap of what you've experienced over the past several years. Tell us when this first started. What year did this start with your child? And then we'll go into the story. We'll watch the video.
Started in 2015, and when my sons, I have twin boys, when they were 3 years old.
And so this is one of your boys that
Yes,
this is
it's
that
James.
this is being done
James.
to. Okay,
Yeah.
James. And, so 2015, 10 years,
It's been
that
10
this has
years.
been going on. Okay, so he's 13, entering puberty, and, we'll get into the details of that, but
Mhm.
let's take a look, at what you've been dealing with since that time. I'm gonna roll this video, and I'm gonna take us off screen to do that. Everybody bear with me.
This man,
Okay.
Jeff Younger, had his 9-year-old child transition to a girl without his consent.
It is illegal for me to tell you that my boys are male.
It all began 2 years ago when Jeff noticed that the behavior between his then-wife, Dr. Ann Jorgulis, and his child had changed.
I first noticed it when she would put him into timeouts and she'd say things like, don't be a boy, the monsters only eat boys.
In the following weeks, the child asked Ann for a girl's meal deal at McDonald's and a silver purse from Target. At that moment, Jeff's wife told their child that she might be a girl and that she would help her transition. Jeff disagreed.
We were still married at the time, and I told her she couldn't do that.
His wife started dressing their youngster up in girls' clothes. Jeff decided to record a video of his child to show his indignation.
She puts dresses on you?
The video went viral, reaching the news around the world.
At this hour, we have not heard from the mother's side yet.
The kid was taken to therapy and assessed to be fit for transition. However, Jeff believed their child was being forced by Ann to accept this new identity.
My son only presents as a girl with his mom. He's never presented as a girl with me or anywhere else.
Upon questioning his child, he was shocked to hear one of the reasons why she wanted to transition.
So he's just told them straight up, Mommy doesn't love me if I'm not a girl.
Jeff confronted his wife. This led them to an irreconcilable fight.
She forced me out of my house, filed for divorce, and then began to really in earnest try to transition my son.
Jeff tried to stop her from doing so, but it was too late.
Despite the fact that I've told the schools they don't have my consent to do this, I've changed his name.
James changed her name to Luna. Amidst their divorce, Jeff offered $20,000 a month in child support to Ann in exchange for 50-50 custody over their kid.
Because I knew if I had 50-50 time with my son, he would reject a female identity because he's never presented as a girl with me.
But Ann refused, fully aware of the intentions her husband had. Jeff was enraged by this decision.
They can make their men do whatever they want because they can take their kids anytime they want.
Jeff tried to fight against the decisions of his wife and daughter.
So I'd take my son to school in boys' clothes, they'd give him a dress.
The school fully supported his daughter's and wife's decision.
I filed grievances with the school district. They said they did not violate my parental rights by transitioning my son without my consent.
In the trial for their divorce, it was agreed that no parent would present Luna as a girl to a third party. However, Ann broke this pact.
The next day, that's how she put him on the website, in a pink dress with a bow in his hair.
Jeff argued that the judge forced the family to transition their child into a girl.
It's the first time in Texas that's ever happened.
The court-appointed psychologists did suggest their child to transition, but they never forced them to do so.
The state of Texas had no compelling interest to justify such interference.
Added to that, the judge believed Jeff's motives to prevent this transition had nothing to do with the well-being of his kid.
The father finds comfort in public controversy and attention surrounded by his use of unfounded facts and is thus motivated by financial gain of approximately $139,000.
The judge allowed Ann and their children to move to California and that she wouldn't have to tell Jeff where she was.
I'm not going to follow your gag order. I'm never going to follow your unconstitutional illegal gag order.
Jeff began a campaign to protect his child and demand what was happening.
I spent over $1 million fighting that.
Through this platform, Jeff shared his ideology regarding underage sex change.
These effeminate bastards march through the corridors of power, telling us that we have to murder our children, castrate them, and condemn them to a life of despair and suicide.
Jeff was invited to the North Texas University to share his experience, but a bunch of students stood against him due to his controversial ideas regarding transgender rights. This case inspired the Texas state to pass a bill which prevents minors from accessing hormone therapy and puberty blockers.
Children need to be protected and allowed to develop into the gender they were born with.
However, this was heavily criticized across the country as it ignores any medical advice on the topic.
The American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, they all say that this kind of treatment is beneficial for kids suffering and diagnosed with gender dysphoria.
In response, President Biden came forward to defend trans rights.
You do belong. And I want you to know that as your president, all of us on this stage have your back.
Ann still has custody over their children, whilst Jeff still fights to stop Luna from transitioning. Ann is still yet to come out to share her version of the events and to shed more light on this controversial case. Thanks for watching this episode of Humanity. Be sure to subscribe for more.
Okay, we're back. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I am Mary Grace. This is the Mary Grace Show. And we are here with Jeff Younger. The video that you just saw is a summary of what he has been through for the last 10 years, trying to save his son, James, from gender transition at the hands of his ex-wife. And here we are today, 3 days out from President Trump's momentous executive order. Jeff, tell us about what the last few days have been like for you.
Well, it's I've been doing Republican politics since the late 1980s, and this is probably the first time I've ever seen a candidate actually just come out of the gates and fulfill their promise to me. And I was directly told by his senior staff they would do this. They told me exactly what was going to be in the executive order, and they went beyond what they told me. They did more than what they said. And it's clear to me that they've even been working with the Congress and that they had a legislative plan. So bills have already been introduced in the federal Congress to support this executive order. So that makes me feel good. And it makes me feel like finally, for once, somebody in the government is looking out for my son. And it's the first time I've ever seen that. On the other hand, my son has had his puberty blocked. I'm not sure yet if he's on cross-sex hormones. I don't think he is. But time is of the essence here. If we don't go further, if we don't get federal legislation, my son's life is going to be ruined through sexual mutilation and these transgender surgeries.
Yeah, this is and like you said, I think the key here is time is of the essence. And one thing that we have that's helping right now is it looks like RFK Jr. is going to be confirmed as the head of HHS. Thankfully, we do have fighters in Congress who are common sense people, and we have the majority in the House and the Senate for now.
Yes.
And so I would say that within the next 2 years, pretty much anything that we want to get passed legislatively, we have to assume that we have only 2 years, knowing that the Democrats are going to try to win back the House and the Senate. And so I agree with you. In the meantime, how are things going on the legal front? Are you trying to I know that there are some lawsuits going in
Mhm,
California.
mhm.
How does this affect those?
Well, they're not going to affect the lawsuits that have already happened. We've got a ruling. Um,
Okay.
in that case, we have the usual post-trial litigation. She's asking for a couple $100,000 in legal fees and all sorts of things. The usual stuff that I've been dealing with for the last decade. I have appealed, and unfortunately, the appeals court in California, the clerks in the appeals court, are doing everything they can to keep me from filing. So now they've said that they're not going to let me file electronically, which is illegal in California. California,
Wow.
it's a law. Everyone can file electronically. So they want me to fly into California and go to the district clerk's window at the appellate court and make my filings there. And what they've been doing is they've denied over and over again my filings for, in one case, a word was misspelled. It had a typo in it. Two letters were transposed. In
Mhm.
another case, there was information in one box on a form, but it was supposed to be in the box to the left. They're just using any little thing they can to prevent me from actually filing the appeal.
Right.
Because of the egregious abuses by the trial court, they know that they're going to have a very hard time upholding the trial court in my
Mhm.
case. And so there's a lot of skullduggery. And, California is a dictatorship, a one-party dictatorship. And the judiciary there is very corrupt. So that's been going on. Um, it's possible with one part of the executive order, Section 3, it directs the federal government to use the best available evidence, scientific evidence, and it specifically bars the federal government from using the WPATH standards, which are the international standards for transgender care, and they're completely bogus. Systematic reviews have been conducted of these treatment standards in Finland, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, France, the United Kingdom, and Canada. And every single systematic review shows that these treatment standards are based on weak or no evidence, and that these treatments have not been shown to be safe and effective for anyone, much less children, especially when they sterilize children. So the fact that the federal government can't use the WPATH scientific standards means that the whole basis of the case in California is gone. Their whole basis was that this is the international WPATH standards. So I can claim that there's been a significant change of circumstances and perhaps get a second trial, which could delay things even further.
Okay. And so what about an injunction? I've just pulled this ruling up here on the
Mhm,
screen for people to see.
mhm.
You can go to whitehouse.gov and see this. And what Jeff is referring to in this is that there is included in the ruling is that right here under section 3, paragraph 1, agencies shall rescind or amend all policies that rely on WPATH guidance, including WPATH's Standards of Care version 8. And this is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, WPATH, which lacks scientific integrity. This is what he's referring to. Everyone can see this on the whitehouse.gov website under presidential actions. And this is from the 28th of January, 2025, just this year, just a few days ago. Um, and so you can read through the language and understand this. What about any kind of injunction? Can you petition to have this procedure stopped pending the outcome
Oh,
of
I
this
definitely
case?
will. Yeah, I
Okay.
can and definitely will. The judge will definitely not do that, but I will put him on the record for not
Okay.
doing that. I'm dealing with a corrupt judge. It's once you
Sure.
realize you have a corrupt judge and you're not going to get a ruling,
Mhm.
your objective is mainly to get the judge on the record violating the law and
Okay.
violating the best interest of the child standard so that you can take it up to an appellate court. So absolutely, I'll be filing for an injunction.
Mhm.
One important thing to note about the WPATH care standards, just for the lay audience to understand just how unscientific and ideological the document is. If you go to Chapter 8 of WPATH's version 8 standards, which is the latest one. It has a chapter, I'm not making this up, entitled Eunuchs. And these are men who have a fetish for removing their own testicles and becoming eunuchs. Wow. The basis for putting this in the WPATH standards is a website, which I'm not going to say on air, but you can get it in the document. I don't want to send it. If there are any children watching, I don't want them to go there. And in this site, there's like what I can describe as maybe fan fiction or, you know, 50 Shades of Grey kind of fiction, if you get where I'm coming from, about eunuchs that involves the sexual exploitation of children, the murder of children, the sexual murder of children. This is one of the websites they reference as a basis for care standards for transgender people. And I'm not making this up. You can go out and look at the document yourself if you're an adult. This is actually how bad WPATH is. It's essentially run by pedophiles. And it's an ideological group, not a scientific group.
Wow. And it seems as though we see this everywhere, that, as you said, it's ideological. It's not based in science, and yet anybody who objects to these things is called a science denier. And you know, we've seen that with other so-called medical issues as well in recent years. Yes. And one of the things that RFK said in his hearing, which I thought was really good, was, you know, to call somebody a science denier is disingenuous, because science is an ongoing exploration, and that what he wants is to follow the science where it leads. And but in the case of children, the science and gender, the science is very clear. I mean, there's something called DNA, and you know, there's the number of chromosomes that a person is born with, and that is indefensible. To say that it's a relative situation is just wrong. And
it's completely wrong.
Right. And I know, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this interview right now, with the conversation that we're having, because we are streaming to some platforms that that still hold people to this ideological standard, as opposed to a medically to a medically objective standard.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've learned. You know, when somebody's trying to kill your kid, you'll learn things pretty quickly. One of the things that I've learned is that our enemies have perfected the social construction of scientific facts.
Okay.
And I've traced, in the case of transgender science, I've traced the exact mechanism by which they do this. At the speech in that video, that short history video that you ran, you saw that mob that attacked me at UNT when I was giving that speech. I got 2 ribs broken. That was a Trantifa mob. That was a transgender Antifa mob. 400 of them tried to kill me, and injured police officers and everything. It was amazing. But the purpose of giving that speech at the university was to show this corruption of the scientific process. And our enemies are truly expert at subverting social processes, and fundamentally science is a social process. And that was their key insight. Here's how it worked with transgender. They essentially selected a fringe group that they thought that they could promote rights. And the basic concept for all of their approaches to social change is to take something that is a behavior, convert it into a status, and then attach civil and legal rights to the status. Right? That's their technique. So, being gay for Christians means that that's a behavior. You can change your behavior. They change that into a status. You're born that way and it's immutable. And then they attach legal rights to the immutable status. So what they did with transgenderism is they chose a very incredibly small group of people, cross-dressers, and they formed an open source journal. And this was done initially in the UK and in California jointly. They formed an open source journal and attracted like-minded scholars who wanted to make some changes. They weren't looking for science. And they began to create scholarship in this open source journal questioning narratives, social narratives around scientific explanations about cross-dressing. They call it meta-narratives. And over time, they construct a new meta-narrative. Eventually, they attract enough scholars to this that they can convert it to a normal peer-reviewed journal, and it gets put into Elsevier, one of the large academic publishers, and it gets the imprimatur of science at that point. Then they began to propose a new meta-narrative. Once they reach legitimacy, they propose a new meta-narrative. And this new meta-narrative is this idea that there is an innate and immutable sense of gender, which causes people to cross-dress. Then
Right.
what happens, these experts go into courtrooms, schools, professional bodies like the American Psychological Association, and they begin to push these new meta-narratives. And these elements, courts, schools, and professional bodies can coerce other people to use these meta-narratives. And then eventually, as it percolates through the court system, it becomes legal. It has legal authority and everyone has to follow. And that is the same procedure that they followed for many other things, but that's the basic mechanism
Mhm.
they use.
Yes, they've done that with abortion. They're
They
they're
did.
they're
Yeah.
turning it, and Colorado, for example, has enshrined it as a guaranteed human right, which is
Right.
insane to me. It's like, now you have a human right to kill another human.
Yeah,
That's
right.
what they've
It makes
done.
no sense.
And they're trying to do it in Virginia and some other states.
Mhm.
So it's anti-life.
It is.
It's anti-sanity. I mean,
It's
all of
completely
it.
illogical. It's completely
Yeah.
illogical.
Yeah, but
And
we
you brought that
know.
up before. When you talked about the fact that it's DNA and so forth,
Mhm.
when I was at trial, I had a expert witness, a transgender expert named CJ Engel. It's just a woman who's an ugly man. And CJ was saying that sex is a bimodal distribution. They like to use these kind of fancy math
Yeah.
words. So what they're saying is, well, you've got these intersex people and these different conditions, so there's kind of a continuum, a discrete continuum between the two. So I just asked her what the definition of sex was, the American Medical Association's official definition of sex, and it's gamete production. If you produce male gametes, you produce sperm, you're male. If you
Mhm.
produce eggs, you're female. The hormonal environment to produce male gametes disallows the production of female gametes. Similarly, if you can produce female gametes, you cannot produce male gametes. Sex is strictly binary. And it just sent her into such a tizzy. That's when the judge intervened and said that my cross-examination of the witness was becoming emotionally abusive to the witness. So, but it's completely illogical. They know it. They actually know
Mhm.
it.
Mhm.
Here's another example from my cross-examination. So I asked her about why have scientific studies not looked at, in the transgender science that she presented. Why are there no studies of boys that went onto puberty blockers at age 13, boys that didn't go on puberty blockers at age 13, and then when they're 18, some of these boys come off puberty blockers and some stay on. Of the ones that stay on the puberty blockers, we compare them to the control group that didn't go on. And she said that's a completely invalid comparison because the ones that went on puberty blockers were girls, and you can't compare girls and boys. So you see how they twist language
Yeah. Yeah.
around, and it was very amusing to put her into these knots.
They use it, yeah, they use the language, they use it when it's convenient for them, but
Right.
they're actually the way that they're using the language actually proves your point.
Correct.
but they're not willing to concede that,
Oh,
correct?
no,
Yeah.
they'll
Yeah,
never
it's
do
very
that.
interesting.
No.
Let's
Yeah.
take a quick break, and we'll come right back, and we will continue this conversation. For those of you who are just joining us, this is Jeff Younger, and he is talking about the recent developments with the federal attention that is coming on the the transgender transitioning of children and President Trump's prohibition of that at a national level. So we will come right back. And I wanted to remind everybody that if you didn't get the notification for today's show, it's probably because you're not on the mailing list. So please go to marygracemedia.com and get on the mailing list. Also, if you want to support this show, we have a number of affiliate partners that you can find on the website. And that's one way to do that. But I wanted to emphasize our particular sponsor this month, and that is our friends over at griddownchowdown.com. They are packaging up some freeze-dried beef, and this is what it looks like. This is a pound of freeze-dried beef, and it's a fantastic product. You can save it for when things go south, or you can use it for your everyday food production. People do both. It is freeze-dried. It is not jerky. This is simply ground beef that you add water and it becomes moist and workable, just like any package of ground beef that you would buy from the grocery store. And we're going to hear from these guys. When you buy from them, you're supporting local American farmers and ranchers. You're helping save American farmland. Also, this month, we have a special, which is that if you sign up for a 24 serving subscription, you're going to get you're going to get 4 servings free. That's quite a tongue twister. Let's do it again. 24 serving subscription. You get free servings, free 4 servings. And it's a great deal. You can get it sent to you every month. You can get it sent every other month, something, whatever you want to do. But let's hear from the rancher. I love hearing from these guys. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Jordan, and this is my brother. And I'm Nace, and we're at the Grid Down Chowdown, and this is Larry, who is a local rancher that we've partnered with. Now, Larry, you've been ranching for over 4 generations, is that correct?
That's correct. I'm 3rd generation, my son's 4th generation, and I've got some grandkids that are 5th generation.
Man, that's awesome.
We've been here for quite a while, yeah.
All right, now, Larry, your cattle is grass-fed, grass-finished, and pasture-raised, just like God intended them to be.
Yes, because I want to know what's in that animal,
Right.
What it's been fed. And so the only way to do that is for us to keep it all natural, just like God has done it for years and years and years, thousands of years.
How has partnering up with us helped you and your ranch?
Well, it's allowed us to develop a market that we didn't have before, one that can get directly to the consumer, and that's great.
And just remember, more importantly, with every package that you buy, we put a salvation track in there. So from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you for allowing us to do what we believe that God has us here to do. And just remember, God loves you. He really does.
Amen.
Go to griddownchowdown.com. Okay, once again, we are back, and if you didn't get it the first time, I'm going to try to say this without mincing my words. This is ground beef. It is freeze-dried. When you subscribe for a 24 serving subscription, you're going to get 4 free servings with your order. And this is a special deal. Use promo code Mary Grace, and this will get sent right to your door. Now, let's get back to our conversation. I have with me Jeff Younger, and he's talking to us about the recent developments from President Trump's team, President Trump and his team. This has been a long time coming. There is an executive order that just was passed down by President Trump having to do with transgender. And what they're doing is they are prohibiting the transgender surgeries and mutilation of children, whether it's chemical or physical. And so this is a big deal because this has been happening all over the country, and it's unimaginable to a lot of us. But this is happening more and more because of the ideology behind it and because of how persuasive and how politically powerful this has become. And that is what you've been up against. That's what you've been fighting. I mean, it's unfathomable to me that we even have to have an order against something called chemical and surgical mutilation of children. And ironically, some of the language in in this proclamation is having to do with female genital mutilation. And it to me, it's ironic because so many of the people who are now in full support of this type of action, this mutilation of children, were previously fighting against female genital mutilation. And for people who don't know what I'm talking about, this is a practice that was brought into our country primarily from A- African and Middle Eastern groups who have used this practice for a very long time. It's a traditional type of practice that is supposed to protect the young girl from prevent a young girl from becoming sexually promiscuous before marriage. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but you can imagine the kinds of things that are done to young girls to keep them, quote, pure for marriage. And there was a great deal of outrage over this from now many of the same people who are fighting to allow, and not only allow, but to force these behaviors on children. So that to me falls in line with what you were talking about with the way that they co-opt and change uh, culture based on these ideals. It's like we saw a similar thing with COVID, where the people who hated Fauci in the 80s came to love him during COVID.
Mhm.
Same people. And so there's a pliable mental status that I think we need
Yeah.
to address.
There's
Yeah.
an excellent book called Convention. If you just go into Amazon, you can just buy it. It's actually there's an ancient philosophical question about the idea of things that are true by nature and things that are true by convention. And it kind of disappeared after the early
Mhm.
medieval period. We don't see people talking about or writing about this problem. But it's in recent years, in the last 10 years, it's become a central problem of big thinkers. And here's why. We've invented new words. The ancients had different words, but they meant the same thing. The word that's important here is something called preference falsification.
Okay.
And some people are extremely vulnerable to this. So it's the idea that you will falsify what your real preferences are. You'll lie about what your real preferences are. Because instead of asking what is true, most people ask, what will people think about me if I say this is true? Most people don't
Mhm.
ask like this for you and me, Mary. This is hard to get our head around. It took me years to get my head around this. Most people don't actually ask, is this true? They ask, what will people think about me if I say this is true? And so what most people do is even if they believe something, they falsify it. They lie about it because they don't want people to have negative thoughts about them. And that's how false social consensuses arise. And the ancient world, this was considered a very important study because they had physically witnessed entire city states collapse because of these fake consensuses that arose. So what we essentially are looking at with the leftist is somebody has a completely different disposition towards the truth than we do. They
Mhm.
for them, we used to say, well, they're virtue signaling. That's kind of what they're doing.
Mhm.
But it's to the point where they will literally deny things that are obviously
Mhm.
true because they don't want people to think that they're a bad person.
Well, this is something that we've seen with the Chinese. This I've just had an aha moment. So there's something in the Chinese culture, or I would say, I don't know if I would call it culture, but it's a struggle session. And this is something that the CCP, the communist movement, uses to pressure people into compliance. And it's based on fear of what other people will think.
Right.
And so, for example, if you have somebody in your village who is starting to go against the grain or starting to stand up for and become individual, to move
Mhm.
outside of the collectivist ideals and thoughts that communism pushes and embraces, then the neighbors are sent to have a conversation with them, to pressure them to fall in line. And this is something that we saw happening again over the last 5 years, that people were pressured to conform. We
Yes.
saw it in grocery stores, put the tape on the floor, and
Right.
the people who stood on the wrong side of the line or who didn't wear the face covering, um, they were in many cases shamed, right? And
Yes.
it was the fear of standing out, it was the fear of being shamed that drove people. It wasn't even necessarily that they believed that what they were doing was right. In fact, I talked to a lot of people who often said, "It's not worth it. Like, I don't wanna stand out. I don't wanna
Right.
be perceived as, being different or other."
Mhm.
And then you have
Yes.
people like me who are like, I am not standing behind that line. In fact, I'm gonna tell everybody in the room that they shouldn't be standing behind the line because all of this is stupid."
Right.
Yeah, and I'm the first person that they would come for. So,
Right.
but it's very interesting because, if you look at statistics, sociology,
Mhm.
the bell curve is what they're leveraging, right? So if you look at
Right.
a heterogeneous group of people, you can always count on about 80% of those people to do a certain thing, to fall within
Mhm.
the bell. And then you've got the edges. You've got the 10% on either end. You've got the 10% that absolutely will never conform, and then you've got the 10% who will conform no matter what, right?
Right.
But everybody in between, somehow they're pliable. I'm not a statistician, but I think I did a pretty good job of explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a big issue with people reasoning about overlapping standard distributions, and that's a whole different question. But this idea of preference falsification. Let me try to give your audience a simple way to understand it
Yeah.
with something that I participated in the early '90s in the United Kingdom. I participated in a marketing study. I was living in the United Kingdom, and I participated in a marketing study for the phone company Orange. And
Mhm.
their question at that time was, do people prefer the brick phones like we use today, or do they prefer the flip phones? Which one is it? So they gave us this big marketing spiel. They demonstrated the qualities of both of their phones, the flip phone and the brick phone and everything. And then it went on for about 45 minutes. It was very, very entertaining. And, they had snacks for you and everything. It was really nice. And then they opened the doors. They made a big thing of this. They opened the doors to the auditorium. They were completely open, and they had two tables separated by a wide space. And on those tables, on one side they had flip phones, and on the other side they had brick phones. And you could pick one or the other. And so I stuck around to see what would happen because I kind of had an idea of what they were doing. And at the end of the thing, everybody left. That was the last one. I looked at the tables, and everybody took a brick phone, and nobody took a flip phone. So I asked the guy who ran the program there. I said, "Did you take?" They gave us like 3 or 4 surveys. I said, "Did you tabulate those surveys yet?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we tabulated them." He said everybody in the auditorium said they wanted flip phones, but we don't care what they say in the surveys. The presentation and the surveys are actually meant to distract you. We only want you to forget that we brought you here for any purpose like choosing a phone. And then when we release you, we wanted to know is what phones would they pick? Would they actually
Mhm.
pick? And you see how they engaged in preference falsification on the surveys. They wrote down what they thought the guy next to them would have because they all had flip phones. The brick phones were fairly new, and they didn't want to be a person to stand out. So the flip phones won the surveys, but when people left, they all chose the brick phones.
Yeah.
And so this is a very common thing that's known by marketers. It's a phenomenon that the ancient world knew about. It's what is driving the false social consensuses that are destroying our society right now.
Mm.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it really is. I'm just taking some notes because it so many light bulbs go off as you're talking about this. Like I said, the
I
struggle
like coming on your
session.
show. Actually, we have a discussion. It's not an interview. We have a wonderful discussion.
Right, exactly. And it's very interesting. And I think my audience will chime into this as well. We're live on a number of platforms right now.
Oh,
It
great.
looks like we've got a pretty big audience watching on X. For some reason, Facebook is not distributing this widely at the moment. Hopefully,
Mm,
we'll get a lot of replay and we'll get a lot of comments.
okay.
I do have a very engaged audience on Facebook, and so hopefully we'll get some people weighing in on this. I would like to hear people's thoughts and experiences about how you've experienced this. If you're having an aha moment, if this is coming up for you, and it is. I'm just looking at one of the comments. Uh, okay, it's yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that, but let's get back to the topic because I think that there's something that I've noticed since Trump took office. Hard to believe it's been less than 2 weeks since he took
I
the
know he's
oath of
gotten so
office.
much done.
Everything is happening so fast, and so but this is interesting. There's something that I've noticed on my social media. As I said, I have a really big Facebook audience, and I would tend to describe my Facebook audience as more mainstream than X
Okay.
or Rumble. And what I mean by that is that I think that it represents a better um, cr cross example, of it's more heterogeneous, I think.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
represents, I would say, more middle America. Um,
Okay.
and I think X is trending that way now since it's, being, frequented by more MAGA people and things like that. But
Mhm.
for the most part, and I wouldn't even say that my Facebook audience is all MAGA, but I would say that they definitely do not represent what I would call coastal elites, right?
Right.
And so where I'm going with that is this. Over the past 8 to 10 years, I've seen my audience practicing a great deal of restraint because of that, in some cases, a fear of reprisal. In some cases, even uh, being protective over their
Mhm.
livelihood,
Yes.
over their family members,
Mhm.
maybe another family member's livelihood, because on Facebook, it's harder to be anonymous for one thing,
Right.
and but in the past 10 days since the inauguration took place and we actually got our guy over the line, I have seen an explosion of unbridled lack of caring what anybody
Right.
thinks. And it's very refreshing. People have thrown off the shackles of restraint. And they're actually saying what they think, and they're commenting on posts. They're
Mhm.
commenting, whereas before they would lurk, just lurk, and maybe hit the heart, or the like. But now, I mean, I have my engagement has gone up exponentially because people
Wow.
are commenting, people are sharing, people are saying exactly what they think. Like, I'm so excited. I love this. This gives me all the feels. This is one of the best posts ever. I've shared this 100 times. Like, things like that. It's not just a it's not a reserved, um, it's not a golf clap.
Right.
It's a it's a championship cheer because the
Mhm.
shackles have been removed. And going back to what you're talking about with the preference falsification, I think that something has like the bottle has been uncorked and
Mhm.
people are pouring out their preferences and being truthful. They're embracing truth and they're no longer afraid and they're not sitting in a little box pretending or refraining from having an opinion. It's amazing to see actually because
Yeah.
people have been restrained for so long.
Yeah. In the book that I recommended, Convention, they call
Yeah.
this a preference cascade,
Ah, there you
where
go.
eventually a critical number of people have expressed preferences contrary to the consensus, and it's sufficient for people to belong to the new consensus of these
Yeah.
people. They're still, in some sense, adopting the consensus. They haven't changed their primary disposition,
Mhm.
but the few people that have a disposition to break from the consensus and orient towards just plain observation can create a group large enough to generate a cascade of consensus people
Mhm.
to change the consensus. And this is a pattern that happens over and over again. That's why it's so important for people like you and I who do have such a disposition to speak freely, frankly, and in many ways kindly,
Mhm.
because we want people to eventually come to our consensus, you know?
Right, right,
Um,
and yeah,
yeah.
and I think that, one thing I've said about Trump is, like him or hate him, he's given people courage
Mhm.
because he is not one to hang back. He doesn't care about the consent, like, he
No.
is not he's gonna check the brick phone on the
Right.
survey.
Right.
And there's a very tiny handful that would check the brick phone, me being one
Yeah.
of them, and then
Yeah.
going out and picking the brick phone.
Right.
Whereas, again, a lot of the other people would have checked the flip phone and then quietly picked up the brick phone. And so now what I'm seeing again, I have almost 100,000 followers on Facebook, so I think it's a pretty good, you know, uh, sample group. But, but again, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing just a highly vocal group emerge. It's not that they never felt this way, it's that they never
Oh, they are.
felt free to
You're right.
express where they are,
Yeah.
and the other thing I'm seeing is that they're pushing back, and so when I put up a post, I put up a video of, it's a song, with, fighter jets. It's a 1-minute
Okay.
video. It's just incredibly, contagious. I mean, it's like the most feel-good video you could imagine,
Right.
and it's gotten close to 2,000,000 views. It's been shared
Amazing.
tens of thousands of times. I guarantee you that 6 months ago, that wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have gone
Right.
viral. People would have watched it, maybe commented on it, maybe, just kind of, hit the like button, but
Right.
they would have their Facebook page private, and it would just be their own little private enjoyment. Now, share, 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 comment, 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 and the few times that people have commented negatively, like saying things like, "America is going down, this isn't good, this is whatever." They In the past, if somebody said something like that, I would get a few counter arguments. This time, those people are in the very small minority. The people that are making these negative comments are in the small
Mhm.
minority, and then the people that are refuting those comments, we're talking thousands. There One person making a negative comment is getting thousands of replies, and it's
Right.
it again, like you're saying, be willing to stand up, be willing to do it, politely, but it's like, "No, you don't understand. This is what America is. This is what America represents." I mean, I can't even keep track of the comments because there's so many, and this is all new. I keep a really close tab on my Facebook page And
Mhm.
so I'm noticing these trends, because right, some people post and they never check the comments, they don't check their stats, nothing like that. I'm not like that. Anybody on my page will tell you I'm monitoring the chat, deleting people who shouldn't be there, etc.
Right.
That and so it's incredible. It's a really good case study of what's happened, and the amount of freedom that people feel. And going back to your son, I think that the work that you've done and the activism of you and people who are standing with you, I think this all ties together because I think now we're going to see more people coming forward. Have you noticed that in the last um, 10 days and especially the last 3 days since this order has come down? Have people been coming forward who maybe were afraid before or who are more timid about letting their voice be heard on this issue?
Yes, and people at high levels. I mean, you're seeing, tech oligarchs question the leftist social
Yeah,
conventions that
yeah,
they adopted for a long time. You're seeing, particularly mothers, who have kind of gone along with this, in
mhm,
left wing states, Washington State, Oregon, California, are going, wait, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe this is going too far.
right,
And I've noticed another thing. I've noticed people actually looking into the facts. Like there was a time when I would say, go look at the Cass report in the UK. It's the
mhm,
largest systematic review ever done in medical science, ever. And it finds that transgender medicine has no scientific backing and that these treatments are not safe and effective. People would just kind of go, well, that's kind of biased and everything. But now people are saying, wow, I went and looked at it. I'm seeing
okay,
people more willing to confront facts
right,
that they previously disagreed with. And I think it's very important for us as people do that to avoid the temptation to ridicule them. I think we need to give them positive reinforcement and say, look, I was once like you. Once I remember having the same ideas, but I found these same facts you did, and now we're together on this issue. What should we do? What do you think we should do? You're new. You have new ideas. Tell us what you
mhm,
think we should do,
yeah,
and bring them in and get them sort of part of the movement. I
yes,
also
yes,
think the fires had a big effect. I mean, man, I
yeah,
can't tell you. I know people who lived in Pacific Palisades,
yeah,
and I cannot tell you how it has changed that. Like, there's no way for them to avoid this, right? My
right,
house burned down, my children were almost killed, my animals are dead because of this liberal social approach, this liberal approach to
yep,
land,
yep,
to city governance, to policing, to the DEI stuff.
mhm,
It's like they're confronting this directly, and it's another
yeah.
reason we need to be kind at this time and say, look, don't make the same mistake again.
Yeah, I actually did a video about this because I've been focusing a lot of attention on Western North Carolina.
Oh
They've
yeah,
really
yeah,
had a time
yeah,
of it.
right at FEMA.
I'm not far from there. My niece lives in Boone, and her house should have washed away, but it
Wow,
was
wow.
miraculously saved. Yeah, I mean, we were telling her, "Get your life jacket." I mean, that was
Yeah,
how bad it was, and so, those people have been left, and there's one man on X, Matt Van Swol. He was a card-carrying Democrat, CNN watcher, from the West Coast, lives in Asheville. Well,
okay,
his journey through all of this has been amazing to watch because he has documented and, uh, and shown the world the utter failure of the government to take care of the people of Asheville and surrounding
right,
counties. It's over 25 counties in North Carolina that were affected by this. And I was down there last month or in December. It looks like a third world country. And I've been in
wow,
third world countries. I mean, the roads, it's atrocious. And but his journey through this has been amazing to watch because the more he's seen and documented the way that the people there have been treated, the further right he's moved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and he's actually, he's had people try to cancel him and try to get him fired from his job because he has simply for pointing out the facts of what has
Right.
happened in this case. And so you're right. I think that sometimes it takes a situation like that to bring people around. And I think with California, I've also pointed out that two things. When you say you shouldn't have voted that way, it's important to note one that California, the electoral map from 2024 moved strongly red. Also,
Mhm.
the elections in California have been rigged for quite some time,
Oh, yeah.
just like they were in Virginia, and so it
Mhm.
really hurts when you tell people you shouldn't have voted that way, because the fact of the matter is we didn't. We didn't pick
Right.
those people, they were selected. And
Right.
then the third thing is, it's vitally important that we understand with California in particular, that the majority of people who have been affected by this are regular people. They're working people, in
Mhm.
many cases, multi-generational families who bought property in Pacific Palisades generations ago. And some of them, there are local businesses. If you've driven through there, these are little mom and pop businesses along the
Right.
PCH. These are not all movie stars. The movie stars are getting the clicks for the news networks, and so of course they're going to be the focus of the stories. But the people who have been hurt the most are the waitresses and the office workers and the retail workers. I mean, the people who keep that place going, the blue collar workers, all of those people have suffered because of
Right.
this, and many of them lived in apartments, so it's not like they can make an insurance claim for anything beyond their personal belongings. This is what people forget. Yes, are there leftists who voted for ridiculous policies? Sure. But a lot of people are not, they do not fall into that category. And it really breaks my heart to see, especially MAGA and, supposedly Christian people saying, well, they get what they deserve. California needs to burn. They've embraced all of these practices that go against God. And I'm just thinking, how are we in the kingdom age of Christianity and we're embracing the laws of sin and death on these people. Like,
Right.
this is not, we're not living in the Old Testament. And yet I've seen attitudes that are trending in that direction. So I'm happy to hear you say this. We really we don't want to wish bad on any of these people, even the celebrities. There's a lot of people in show business that are conservative, and they fall into
Oh,
that
yeah.
category. They fall into that category of the preference falsification because
Yeah.
they don't want to be canceled. But deep
Right.
down, they're one of us, I think.
Right. Yeah, I
Especially,
agree. And you see Trump taking charge of the water situation there and getting
yeah,
things done. And
yeah,
there's the, objective demonstrations like this are very powerful in changing and creating a
yeah.
preference cascade.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, listen, we're actually coming up on an hour here.
All right.
It's always
Like
fascinating
that.
talking to you. Yes, and I think let's just close with give us a quick recap of what's happening to your son, where you see the situation now, and where you see it going, where you hope for it to go, and then also let everybody know how to follow you and how to follow
Sure.
this story.
Sure. So my son was put on puberty blockers and chemically castrated in December, but if we can get the puberty blockers out of his system early enough, it won't have any permanent effects. I'm hoping to use Trump's executive order to coerce the California courts to at least delay this stuff with my son. And I'm continuing to appeal in California. If Trump follows through with the Congress and they create a federal cause of action to sue in federal court, I'll be in federal court the day that law passes. You can see me on X at Jeff Younger Show. You can find out more about the case, and if you have $5 or $10 to help out with legal fees, you can go to savejames.org, savejames.org. I'm always available on X. My DMs are open, and if you want to talk to me, just contact me there.
Excellent. And I put the savejames.org in the chat here so people can access that. And thank you everybody for being here today. And again, please continue to follow this situation, especially if you're in contact with anybody, any friends, family member who are going through this. Make sure they know about this executive order. I'm hoping that they know, but it's hard to tell. You just never know because when people are going through this kind of thing, any kind of trauma, it's all they can do to keep their head above water. And please grab the link. It's the White House. Send them this information. Make sure they know this is something that obviously, if they're working with an attorney, hopefully their attorneys will be aware of this. And if their attorneys are not aware, maybe they need a new attorney. But thank you again, Jeff Younger, for being here. This is always interesting to have a conversation with you. And thank you again, everybody, for being here at the Mary Grace Show. We will be back tomorrow morning. I have with me our friend Troy Sproul from Official Synapse, and here's the link to his website. We will be doing a live Q&A with him. And he is a functional medicine specialist. His clinic works with people in all 50 states and multiple countries. So come back and join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern here on the Mary Grace Show. If you want to know where to watch, you can go to my website, marygracemedia.com, and you can click on all of our platforms. Everyone have a good evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.